Finger control is one of the 3 important pillars in the mechanics of drumming. And it's important that you do exercises that help isolate your fingers so you can improve control and dexterity and raise overall awareness of how they move in coordination with your wrists and your arms. There are 3 primary origins of movement in drumming. The first is arm, full arm stroke. The full arm stroke is the loudest, most powerful stroke you can have. It's also the slowest. You cannot go very fast when you're doing an arm stroke. The second is wrist movement, the wrist stroke. Powerful, but not as powerful as the arm stroke, but it is faster. Then the third is fingers. Finger strokes are going to be faster than wrist and arm, but they're also going to be a little bit lighter. You can still get some power out of it, but not as much as wrist or arm. To get started on some exercises that will help you develop better finger technique, we're going to talk about this grip right here. Now this is French grip, and it's what's often taught with timpani technique. With timpani technique, it incorporates a wrist rotation along with finger control. We're not going to be using the wrist rotation because we're going to want to isolate the fingers and be incorporating those control exercises. So with the timpani technique, you have your fulcrum right here, and we're going to use this to develop our finger control exercises. So what you want to do is you want to practice holding the stick like this and keeping it upward, and you want to pretend that there's a spring that holds it upward. For instance, if you were to pull it down and let go, it springs back up. If you push it down, it springs back up. It doesn't just stay down. Now, an easy way to do that is simply be moving your thumb forward and back, like that. When you pull your thumb back, it's going to spring up. That rebound spring is very important in these exercises. And the first exercise we're going to do is we're going to practice switching fingers on this fulcrum. So instead of first finger and thumb, we're doing middle finger and thumb. And we're just going to practice moving the stick down and having it snap back up. So if you move it down and it flops, you're not snapping it back up. Remember, this is the key right here, and this is what a lot of people miss when they're doing this exercise. Have that stick spring up. So you switch from first finger to middle finger. Then you switch and do ring finger. Now this may be really difficult at first and it may be flopping all around. That's okay. Do it slowly, and if nothing else, just practice holding it upright and using your finger, your thumb particularly, go up and down. And weirdest of all, pinky. Then you go back and do ring finger, then middle finger, and first finger. Notice I am not doing this. My students have a hard time with this because right away they're moving their wrist. One thing you could do to help prevent that, put a stick right there and make sure that you're not doing that. Okay, so you're trading off fingers, switching fingers, and you could do exercises like 4 in a row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Going all the way down and then reversing, coming all the way up. Okay, that's the first one, switching fingers. The second one will be adding fingers. You start with the first finger. Now remember, the idea is that the stick is staying upright like a spring. It's holding it up. And you push it down and it springs back up. If you don't have that, you might find yourself having trouble in doing this floppy thing here. So we're going to add fingers now. So now we add the middle finger. So now we have 2 fingers helping to push it down. And then ring finger. And then pinky. And you want to take your time with this. Notice how my fingers are being fully engaged. They aren't tight, they're loose and fully extended. Now remove a finger. Remove a finger, remove a finger. And just like before, you can do any number of repetitions. You can do 8s or 4s. You can do 8, 4, 2, 1. We'll just demonstrate 4 for speed. Add a finger. Okay, again, make sure you are not moving your wrist up and down. You're using just fingers. So here's another technique to help practicing engaging your fingers. So what you do is you turn your sticks around and you hold your arms out and you play on your forearms. Now notice when I'm doing this, my fingers are being extended right there. So that's kind of what we're practicing here, is we're practicing awareness of extending your fingers loosely and pulling them back. I think that's where people struggle when they're trying to do finger technique, is they're remaining tight and they're not really allowing their fingers to flow freely. So if you look the side view, notice I'm not doing this. So again, if you take your stick and do this, the idea is that you are extending your fingers and playing that way. And you can just do repetitions or work on some patterns. You do it too much, your arms will get sore. But again, making sure you aren't pronating your wrist. You're extending your fingers and pulling them up. Again, it's just another way to sense what it feels like to engage your fingers. Here's another one that's kind of odd, and that is switching fulcrums. So fulcrum being the control point, we usually have right here. So what you're going to do is you're going to switch right here and then play. You've got your stick being held by that. Now notice my fingers are extending and pulling back. I'm not doing that. So my fingers are stretching out and pulling back. Anything we're doing here, you want to practice with the other hand. Now, I tend to do a majority of my playing with traditional grip, so in general, my matched left hand is often behind my right. Speaking of that, I will be doing a video on traditional grip, bouncing, and finger technique. When that is up, I will put a link in the description. So back to this, you just practice doing this technique. You can try to do rhythms. So then move the fulcrum over here. So what this does, now you're forced to do your control with these two fingers. Kind of weird. But again, you are practicing isolation and engagement. You're kind of teaching your brain what it feels like, and you're practicing relaxing. Then weirdest of all, this pinky. Again, notice the only thing that's moving is my pinky and not my wrist. Last one then is to just practice what I call this rapid fire trigger, where your hand just locks down. There's not tension, but it locks into place. And again, stick is bouncing up, your fingers are pushing it down. It naturally goes up, fingers are pushing it down. And I just do that. Trigger, whatever you want to call that. Okay, now that's something you can just do mindlessly while you're listening to music, you're talking to other people, watching TV, whatnot. You want to do that with both hands there. So now let's talk about application. A lot of times I will see people practicing finger technique like this, yet when they play the drum set and snare drum, they're playing with their wrists over like this. So they either work on this and then it never happens over here, or they're playing over here, and when they want to do fingers, they can only do it French grip. They'll be playing and then suddenly fingers, fingers, fingers. And that's not really ideal to have to change back and forth. So what you want to do is you want to then figure out, how do you take these isolation exercises using my fingers, but then moving it over here. Now, when I was first learning this in college, I was very diligent with practicing, but then I would start to play And I honestly couldn't tell if I was really isolating my fingers. I would have to have someone watch and say, is this finger technique? It's hard to know. And then I realized something, that when I'm playing kind of in the standard position like this with my wrists out, it's hard to extend my fingers. So I noticed if I let my wrists kind of dangle like this, you see how naturally your fingers can extend, versus you can do it a little bit like that, but it's much easier like that. So when I started doing that, I suddenly gained much more awareness, and I realized that I was able to extend my fingers like that. Oh, darn it. Like that. So keep that in mind. If you practice just letting your wrist dangle a little bit, that will help you get used to this. Now, there's a warning for this. You don't want to crank your wrist down, because if you're doing anything that pinches your tendons, you could do some serious harm. So I'm not saying doing that. So here's one thing you can try. Doing this French grip, rotating around. Getting used to that. I'll just do it with one hand here. So practice that. Make sure when you do this, you don't go into that. You see that? French grip. So you want to get used to that. You can practice things like, I like to do stick control page 10, short roll combinations, where it does 1/8 notes to 16ths. And if you pick a tempo that's fast enough, you can do wrists for the 1/8 notes, and then fingers. That's a good way to practice switching. There's a rudiment, the 4-stroke roll. I'll do it like this. And if you do it fast, you do it to a certain tempo, you almost have no choice but to do fingers. And what that ends up being is I'm just doing 2 doubles. You see that? So another form of application, the way you're going to really use finger technique, when you're doing the double stroke roll, and you need to do a nudge, that nudge on the second one, keep in mind, it's not a raised accent, because that would be ridiculous to try to do a roll like that. But if you do a nudge, that's actually finger control there. So there's a direct application right there where finger control can improve other parts of your drumming. The other thing I use finger control for all the time is ride cymbal, especially in jazz. When I rotate my hand over, if I'm playing fast ride cymbal, and notice when I'm going faster, the stick is nestled a little bit closer to my palm. And the motion is very subtle. I'm not trying to do this. I'm literally just nudging about like that. Okay, I hope you found these exercises useful. Go through them and really work on the isolation and the control, and then definitely work on the application. Make sure you're not stuck with only doing it in French grip, that you're able to relax your fingers when you turn your hands over. And be watching for my traditional grip video, and I'm going to be making a practice video that goes through all these exercises, but in an organized, longer session. All right, have fun.